Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a great hearing on a really important topic, I think. And I asked a geologist friend once when I looked at the map, I said, why is all the hot water out west? And he said, well, it's obvious those states are closer to hell. You can tell I'm not running for president, Madam. But I do want to focus on geothermal resources in the non-Western states where the temperature may only be 45 degrees, but we have a well-developing geothermal heat pump market in New England. But the issue is installation costs. $40,000 for a 2,000 square foot home. How do we drive those costs down? And you talked about drilling technologies because you got to drill deep wells. Are there other ways, and is it partially scale? Is it partially, what are the answers that will improve the ability of these kind of more localized in areas, a lot of part of the country that don't have 180-degree water under the surface?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from scale. Certainly, if you're doing a one-off project and you have to mobilize your rig, and you have to mobilize the heat pump unit, and you're deploying all of this.
So that gets to the district heating solution you were talking about. Is that part of a solution, particularly if you're in a urban area?
Yeah, yes, district heating is very popular, in fact, in Europe for this reason. It's because they have a much higher population density than a lot of the places here in the U.S. But when you do have densely populated areas, a lot of the cost of these district heating systems is in the surface piping. So, so the district heating becomes viable in larger cities and in densely populated areas.
The economics in Maine is quite good. It works out to about 85 cents a gallon of oil, a comparable heating value, and now oil is now about $2.75. So the economics are good, but still the upfront cost is a significant barrier, and there are tax benefits and incentives, but I think that's something we really need to think about. I'm very interested in what you were talking about permitting. It's always struck me that environmentally strong projects like solar, wind, or geothermal have to pass the same exact permitting requirements as if they were strip malls. In other words, there's no sort of net environmental benefit analysis done. What about permit by rule, which we've been very successful in Maine, where if you have great experience with this technology, you know what the impacts are, and the agency says, if you do it this way and meet these standards, you got your permits. We don't have to do 100 environmental studies of each individual site. Is that a possibility in this area?
So I don't know a lot about Maine's permit by rule, but it does, the way you've described it sounds a lot like what a categorical exclusion is.
Same idea.
Yeah, that you have this category of activities that you've reviewed the environmental impacts.
Now my question is it federal permitting, is that the issue, or is it local and state permitting? What's the, several of you mentioned permitting as a barrier. What's the barrier? Is it the state of Nevada or the state of California, or is it NEPA? Where do we need to focus here?
Well, for the first part of the development project, where they're drilling for the wells and haven't yet accessed the resource, that's where the risk is the highest, and that's where we focused on these federal categorical exclusions. So the ability to drill and access the resource as quickly as possible and inexpensively as possible in order to get financing for the rest of the project. It depends, obviously, on the location of the project, if it's on federal lands, and also in which state you're in, and how well the different states work together in aligning their processes.
And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about waiving environmental requirements or ignoring environmental impacts.
We agree.
But if you've done the same project 100 times and you know exactly what the impacts are and what they will be and what to look for and how to mitigate, it seems to me there's an opportunity there for dealing with this. And as you point out, these are upfront costs. These are high-test dollars. There's no tax subsidy. If the project doesn't go, you've lost that money.
That's correct.
Other comments? Yes, sir.
If I can, through the chair to Senator King, I like the analogy of the strip mall, except a strip mall doesn't have to get the permit 3 times, and that's the case for geothermal projects on federal lands. you know, unlike a wind or solar project where you can put up an anemometer or look at the solar radiation without disturbing the land, to find the geothermal resource below the surface, we have to go out and do some preliminary exploration or resource confirmation. And what's different in the United States than in the rest of the world is to go out and drill those slim holes and start to do exploration, which sounds like the
It's a
rule by
met
law.
tower in the, down instead of up.
Exactly. But in order to drill those wells, we have to go through NEPA and get an environmental assessment on each one of those exploration wells. And that is what has just incredibly slowed down the industry, because you're now getting a delay and a cost before you even know if there's a resource there or you want to pursue it. And so what is in most of our written testimony here is the concept of, like you said, every exploration well looks very similar. The surface disturbance is minimal. They can be reclaimed, you know, very, very quickly. It's to treat all of those the same and give a categorical exclusion in NEPA.
With certain requirements.
With certain
Follow
requirements.
these requirements.
And then once we you know, qualify a resource and say this is something we want to build, then we go through NEPA again for an environmental assessment on a production well, which is treated in code much differently than an exploration well. And then we get to do one for the actual siting of the power plant as well. And so that is, you know, those three things are what we are trying to streamline to say, give us the categorical exclusion through exploration or resource confirmation. We're not skirting any environmental concerns. And once we decide to drill a full-size production well, start moving, you know, thousands of gallons of geothermal fluid through a power plant, we will go through the full EA and EIS project. We operate about
Bearing
400.
in mind that we're building a project that's a net positive for the environment in terms of carbon, which is the goal, our universal goal here.
100%. And a project with a smaller surface footprint for the amount of megawatt hours it produces than any technology outside of nuclear.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.